I've spent the last 8 years working with startup founders to build and launch their minimum viable products. Today, I wanted to share the 10 biggest lessons I've learned along the way that I really believe if you do not take into account, they can really cripple your startup's growth. If you're new here, hey, I'm Chase, and I'm a software engineer that has spent the last 8 years building and launching high-growth software products through my development agency. Now, I'm sharing my experiences from that journey, all with the goal of helping to empower solo founders to have a greater chance of success when building and launching their own startups. All right, now let's get into it. So the first lesson learned, rushing to launch quick can actually have devastating results, which I know is pretty much counterintuitive to the whole build and launch quick philosophy that is currently going on in today's startup world. Well, let me give you a real example of a business that I had partnered with that just because we were trying so hard to hit a deadline quickly and get something out there, how that actually ended up pretty much killing the business from the very beginning. So this project was going to be a new mobile app that was launching into the cryptocurrency space and was really just offering a brand new way to interact with the blockchain and trade ERC20 tokens and all of that type of stuff. It was a product we were trying to launch during one of the peak bull runs of the cryptocurrency market, and so it felt like everything was just about trying to get stuff out there as quickly as possible. And what we laid out was a really aggressive development plan that said, all right, we're just gonna get something onto the App Store and the Google Play Store just so that we can start moving forward. But what also added to the actual kind of downsides was that we were going to be launching to a large audience. So there was going to be a big influx of users on like the very first launch day of this product. And so as the timeline was kind of getting closer to actual launch day and our development team was just trying to get stuff done and shipped without really fully thinking through the bigger impact or the foundation to what we were doing, it was just all about being heads down in the moment, just really like seeing barely right in front of you, getting stuff out there so that we could launch this product. And so what happened was we launched the product on time, but we launched on a really shaky foundation. And once we had thousands of users instantly hitting the app and overloading our servers, we had crashes, we had bugs. It was just kind of a nightmare. And really that just comes to show that we weren't ready for launch. And we knew that almost from the very beginning, that we were just prioritizing getting something out there and sacrificing too much on stability and long-term growth of the product. And honestly, if we had launched a month later, it would have made no difference in terms of the amount of people we had visit on launch day, but it would have made a massive difference in being able to really plan out everything in terms of the technical architecture and stuff so that we were able to scale with the amount of users we were expecting. So as much as we want to launch quick, we also need to really think about the long-term ramifications of the technology we're building and realize it's actually probably going to be okay if we extend the timeline to get to market and focus on building something that's quality. It's all a balance. You don't want to go too fast, but you don't want to go too slow. You want to find something that is in between. Lesson number 2, never ever stop talking to customers while you're building your startup. What I've seen time and time again is that founders will come to me with ideas and pitch them saying, hey, let's build these features in XYZ way. And maybe there was some customer validation done up front, but once that build phase starts, all customer validation or talking with customers usually goes out the window. And this can actually really hinder the development of features because, again, we need to be talking to customers the whole time. You might have this vision of how it works in your head that when in reality you present it to a customer, they're like, you know, this is nice, but actually I want it to work like this. And so something that I really encourage is making sure that you're always talking to customers, especially during the build phase. That can be a really critical time when you can actually get some of the most valuable feedback on that initial direction of building your product. So what I like to do is really make sure that every sprint, which in kind of just the tech world is 2 weeks, we have check-ins with customers showing the actual visuals and giving prototypes of the features that are going to be coded and built. This way, you can start to pivot what you're building and make sure your customers are always in the loop so that you don't end up launching, 2, 3, 4, 5 months from now with something that your customers didn't even envision you building or wanting from those initial customer validation calls you had done. So make sure you're talking with customers during that build phase, the launch phase, and pretty much every single moment that you can. It's the most valuable thing you can do to make sure you're building a high quality, valuable product. Lesson learned number 3, do not be your only source of validation for your idea. It can be great to kind of scratch your own itch and think of things that you have problems with and start building towards solving those, but it's really only a starting point. And very related to the last lesson is that you need to talk to customers and you need to diversify the amount of people that you're talking with. So make sure that you're getting out there, that you're doing customer interviews and not just relying on maybe your own expertise in an industry to be the sole source of truth for the product that's going to be built. All right, lesson number 4, thinking that everything is going to be so much easier after launch. So back when I was building my very first MVPs for clients, I always felt like, all right, we're doing the hardest part. We're trying to get that vision out of the founder's head into a real working product that other people can use and pay for. But come to find out, that's actually probably the easiest part. And once you have real customers barking at you, asking for things right away, and you have to manage all of this customer support, balancing which features have priority, and just all of the things that come with post-launch, I started to realize that, that's the hardest part, is after launching. So just remember that the hard work does not end once you actually launch your product. You need to have a great post-launch plan in place, and just realize that a lot of the hard work is yet to come, and you're gonna face so many new challenges, especially as you have people actually using the product that weren't there before. Lesson number 5, thinking that just by having an MVP, that you can now go out and secure investors really easily. The truth of the matter is that an MVP is really just another tool to help show validation that people are interested in this startup that you're building. So it's important to remember that user growth, adoption, and at the end of the day, revenue is really what's going to drive the ability to easily acquire investors. You don't necessarily want to be banking that, hey, I'm gonna put all of my life savings or something like that into developing my MVP, and that's gonna let me instantly get investors right after. When in reality, there's still gonna be a lot of work in negotiations, pitch decks, and just making sure that you're driving growth that's really going to influence your ability to attract investors for your startup. All right, lesson number 6, and honestly, I feel like this is one of the hardest ones to really embrace, which is not being willing to pivot your idea after launching. So in the startup world, 9 times out of 10, the initial idea that you have usually is not the thing that you actually end up building. By doing your customer research, market research, and all of that type of stuff, you usually start to pivot down a different path that is kind of different than what you initially set out to build. And that's all and great, but it should never stop, especially after building your initial MVP and launching it to the world. I truly believe that an MVP is something that will actually give you a ton of insight into where to go next. It's very rarely ever the thing that stays the same and what you actually have as your core product. And the reason why is because once you launch an MVP, now your customers can really get hands-on with what you envisioned building and what you've talked to them about. And that's where a lot of the learning for them will come from. We get a lot of messages like, oh, it would be great if it actually worked like this, or I really need feature X to solve my problem. That type of stuff will only come from launching your MVP and getting it out there. It's really hard to collect that feedback up front. So remember that keeping that mindset of always pivoting towards where the value is really important to keep, especially after launching. And just because you've built something does not mean that you can't change it. Even the bigger companies that are late into their Series C, D, E, and F rounds, they're still pivoting. They're still working on launching new products to the world. And so just because you launched your first MVP does not mean that you should stop that innovative mindset, and you should keep going and finding ways to build on top of it to provide a lot of value for your customers. Moving on to lesson number 7, which is that thinking that software is going to sell itself once you launch. I think there's another misconception that a SaaS business requires no effort once you launch. And what I mean by that is like, oh, I launched, it's out there, people can use it, they can sign up themselves, pay through the payment provider that we linked up, and all is well. They'll just use it and never have any complaints or comments or anything like that. The reality is that there is so much work just to get customers into your product and using it and actually getting all of the value out of it. There's a reason why that some jobs are just dedicated to customer onboarding for B2B SaaS products. And that's because they're really complicated. They might actually be solving a real problem for the business, but they still might need to learn how to fully take advantage of what you built. And so it can take a lot of time to actually close a deal with a potential prospect. The benefit is once they do learn, then it can kind of start to drop off, but the time required to onboard a customer is not zero, and that you should be planning to dedicate time to customer onboarding, inbound sales, and all of that type of stuff to really ensure that the value of your product comes across for your customers and that they're happy using what you've built. Lesson number 8, and this lesson is really for all those overthinkers like me or perfectionists that want to build the perfect product right away. There's no such thing. And there can be a ton of wasted time to overthinking and overcomplicating how much you need to deliver for your first MVP. And so while you do need to think about the scalability of what you're building, that does not mean you need to hammer in 20 different features and just have this fully enterprise-ready product by the initial launch. There, again, needs to be a balance. And on this end, you want to make sure you're really focusing in on what the core value is of your first MVP. So while you probably have this great vision of all of the things that you can add in for it, at the very beginning, you should really just focus on that one thing that's going to make a difference and build that really well and launch with that. The other part too is that you want to show that your company is growing and that there's going to be new things that will come out that will enhance what you're offering. And that's why it can actually be a really big benefit to hold off on building everything at the beginning, because now you can create a roadmap and you can share that with your customers and be like, hey, I know that you mentioned you really want this feature and I totally agree. You can actually see on our roadmap that we're going to have that delivered in about a month from now. So expect that within the product at that time. And you can just outline all the things that you wanted to have up front, but put it in a roadmap. And now your customers will have something to look forward to, and they can also give you opinions on what's going to be a priority so that you can really just hone in on building the most important things at all times. And lesson number 9 is thinking that development work is done after launching your MVP. And to be honest, once you launch, that's when development truly starts, because at that point, you probably have customers, and those customers are going to now be expecting their bugs to be fixed, their feature requests to be worked on, and just the maintenance of your product to ensure it's stable and something that will continue to deliver value long term. And so it's important to recognize that while it can be great to offshore your development of your first MVP to just get something out there, you really need a long-term partner to ensure that you're consistently delivering on high-quality results on the technical side so that your software continues to grow even beyond that initial launch. All right, and the final lesson I learned is not having a customer support plan can really ruin a launch. So most founders, including myself, envision this perfect launch where everything goes great, people are excited, and all of that. But in reality, you're going to have people that don't understand what you built, have some bug, didn't receive an email, or just something happened that they need to reach out to you for. And if you don't have that plan in place, it can really deter customers from ever coming back to your product. So part of your launch plan should really be around how are you going to handle customer support, what tools are you going to use, when will you respond, will you use autoresponders, all of that type of stuff. You really want to think it through, because those initial stages, your customers will be reaching out to you. And the precedent you set at that early stage will really dictate how your customers perceive your business and how willing they are to refer you to other people they may know that would get value from your product. So make sure you have that plan in place from the beginning. Again, from personal experience, there's been many times where that's the last thing that we think about in terms of the launch strategy, and we come to launch, we don't really have a great customer support plan in place, and boom, all of a sudden now we're struggling to really raise the quality of the business because people are complaining that our customer support sucks or something like that. So that initial customer contact is super important in those very early stages. So make sure it's a core part of your launch plan when it comes time for launch day. Now, if you want some additional tips and tricks on how to be an effective solo founder, and also some of the tools that we use in this whole AI revolution to really speed up the software development process, be sure to click the link in the description below to join our newsletter, where we'll share those insights with you weekly. And if you're interested in seeing me actually go through this whole startup process from day one, be sure to check out this video here, where I'll actually show you what that day one really looks like when building a software product.